Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Michigan Concrete Association's fall seminars. We typically have done these every year for a number of years, geared towards local agencies, their consultants, and any concrete related topics we feel are top of mind and that we need to share with our partners in the industry. So welcome, and we're glad to have those of you that are on the webinar this morning. We've done these in person in the past, and unfortunately we've had to transition them to webinars this year. We used to do a 4-hour in-person seminar, and for the last probably 10 years prior to that, we would do an 8-hour in-person seminar. This year we transitioned to 3 roughly 1 to 1.5 hour webinars. So today, tomorrow, and Thursday, 3 different topics covering about an hour, just over an hour each day. To give you a break in between. We felt that this was the best format. So welcome. I'm glad you could join us. As you can see, the topic we have today, we're going to cover the MDOT 2020 Spec Book update as far as concrete related changes. Obviously, that's what we're concerned about. There are a number of other changes we know in the Spec Book that we are not as well versed in, that you may have heard based on your work in all aspects of the road building and bridge building industry. So we're going to cover mostly the specific concrete related ones. There are obviously some that affect all of us that we're not going to cover because we were not privy to a lot of those discussions and drafts and things like that. So that is our topic for today. I'm Steve Walkus, MCA's Director of Engineering covering West Michigan. Coming to you from my home here in the Grand Rapids area. So again, we're going to be on the line here for about an hour and 15 roughly, plus or minus. And lastly, this PowerPoint was just uploaded in PDF format, but in full slide format to our website. I just did it about 10 minutes ago. Make sure you type in that link correctly, info.miconcrete.org/virtual-learning. That will get you to our virtual learning landing page on our website. We've got past webinars that we did this past spring, PDFs of those. If anybody's interested, email us. There's a link on that page, and I have my email at the end of this PowerPoint if you'd like any more information on any of that stuff. But this particular one is the last one listed there on that website, which I will drag over so you can see it. There we go. We've done a number of webinars this spring, but this latest one that I'm talking to you today is available here on our website, info.miconcrete.org/virtual-learning, and you can download this PDF here by clicking on it. If the link is broken for some reason, if I didn't do it properly, let me know. And I will try and fix that after the presentation this morning. So that is what you can download this PDF for your future use to be able to reference that, because there are a number of concrete related changes coming up with MDOT's spec book update that is coming. So with that, we'll dive right into it. Please feel free as we move along to use the Q&A portion of the Zoom software. You can type in your question, that will log it into the Zoom system, and then we have access to it afterwards as well. We'll try to answer it real time, both in the presentation. If I see it show up, I will try and stop and answer it when we're talking about that slide. It also allows the other staff members that are on the call here to type an answer to your question, if in fact I am unaware that you posted the question, or if I can't answer it. So we have other MCA staff on the line. I'm just one of 9 staff members at the association. 7 of us are all technical experts, a couple of admin folks. So we have a good team of individuals in the concrete industry to help answer your questions. And that is our job at MCA, is to support the concrete industry and those who choose to build with concrete. So that's our mission and objective, and we're here to help everybody get the most that they can out of their concrete that they're building with, whatever you're building out of concrete. So that's my introductory remarks. There is a chat window as well in the Zoom software. That's more for technical issues, not necessarily specific questions about the material, but if you have a technology type of issue with the Zoom or something like that. But for specific questions related to the material, please put that in the Q&A so we can answer those. All right, we'll move on and get started here. So in regards to the MDOT 2020 spec book update, what we're going to talk about this morning, we're going to give everybody a little background on the current spec book, the 2012 spec book, just so everybody understands where we currently are. We are in the year 2020, but we'll also then talk about how the 2020 spec book and when it's going to get implemented, because we're already kind of past the midpoint of 2020 here, and we're pushing up on the fiscal 2021 for many agencies, including MDOT, that start with an October 1 fiscal year start. But at any rate, we'll talk about the overall changes that we see in the book as it relates more to concrete, obviously, but some bigger picture ones. And then we'll dive right into specifics as far as Division 6, 8, and the new one, number 10. We're not going to get into specifics on Division 9 materials in general, but we will touch on it slightly. So those are the main concrete related ones, are divisions 6, 8, and 10 in the spec book. So bid items that start with a 6, a 8, or a 10. And reminders, again, of what has not changed. We're just going to summarize and end with some things that are not changing. And just to remind those of you out designing and building with concrete of things you need to keep an eye on, remember, and things that you may not be aware of that have been in the specs, details, etc., that you might not be aware of that has changed, at least in the past, or just reminders of good practice. So that is our agenda for this morning as it pertains to the MDOT spec book and concrete changes. So background on the current spec book 2012, I don't have a screenshot of the printed cover. I don't know what color it's going to be. That's always a big debate, whether it's maroon or green or blue or whatever. They like to move it around over time. So I don't know what the printed version scanned cover will look like, and I don't have the 2012 one on my home office. But this is the PDF version that you see pictured on the right there. It's currently 9 divisions, 9 main sections for the different construction items you'd see on an MDOT project, roadway or bridge construction project. And obviously Division 6, concrete pavements, Division 8, incidental, which includes a lot of curb, sidewalk, curb and gutter, driveways, things like that. A lot of concrete items in Division 8 as well. I'm not going to touch on Division 7 structures. Most of the concrete material related stuff does apply to concrete bridges and structural concrete. But as far as the bridge building, the MITA group takes care of that. We were not involved with the spec book revisions and updates in concrete bridge building items. That would be some information that MITA would have for you. So we're covering primarily Division 6, 8, and the new one, number 10. But there was no number 10 in the 2012 book, so that's a little hint at what's coming up there that we'll cover later. A little background on concrete pavement mixtures. Those were all specific to pavements. They were all in Division 6. And again, that's a little hint at what things are being reorganized and consolidated. There was a lot of duplication in the past in MDOT's spec book because they had concrete mix information in Division 6 for pavements, but those were very similar to a lot of the structural mixes that were in Divisions 7, and the same types of mixtures that were used for incidental items such as concrete driveways, curb and gutter, sidewalks, etc., that were built out of concrete from Division 8. So if you had a concrete question, chances are you would have had to dive into Division 6, 8, 9, or 7 to find your answer, depending on what it is that you were pouring, what it is that you were designing or building. So just a little background. This is where they were in Division 6. And as far as what those concrete grades, those code names, those nomenclature, what that means, P1M is high performance concrete pavement, pretty much the standard for all concrete paving in Michigan now. P1 is the old standard, still used for some miscellaneous concrete. Maybe local agencies who don't want to use the high performance would still spec P1. A small project, even through MDOT, sometimes would still utilize P1 and low traffic situations. Nothing wrong with it. It's just MDOT has moved towards high performance for all their concrete paving. P2 is a mixed code name or grade that could be used for concrete shoulders primarily. You can always use a higher grade for a lower grade. So you can use P1 for shoulders or P1M for shoulders, but P2 is pretty much only can be used on shoulders. P-NC is a patching mix. The NC stands for non-chloride. This is the background on the 2012 spec book. This is not going into the new stuff yet. I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. P-NC is for joint repairs, full depth repairs, and M is for commercial concrete, typically non-MDOT concrete outside the right of way if they have to replace a private business sign foundation, things like that. Division 7, again, different code names for those. Don't get too attached to these because that's a little hint of what's coming, which is updated nomenclature for all this. But the spec book table, table 701-1A and B on structural mixes, and those typically structural mixes start with S. So S1 for foundations and piles, S2 for bridge structure, curb and gutter, driveways typically. S2M would be for high performance bridge structure. Usually not using that for curb and gutter or driveways, but can be utilized. And it's for high profile, high traffic bridges. It's S3 typically just for sidewalks. D is our typical deck mix, which is why it has that code name. Again, these are all changing, and there's a hint of what they'll be called in the new spec book. High performance bridge decks would be a DM. The M would stand for modified, just like it did in the P1M. Again, that we're doing away with that. And then T for Tremy concrete for underwater, typically bridge structure, bridge foundations. However, with those tables being in the spec book, in the last 8 years, we pretty much had that information instead also in a special provision for concrete. Depending on if you were a local agency project, it was the 604A special provision. I believe we're in versions 11 or 12 now, something like that, where all that information has actually been superseded in that special provision. Same thing for MDOT projects. They have their own special provision for QA, QC for concrete. The only reason why they would have a different one than local agencies, they have 604B instead of 604A, is because they, for concrete paving jobs, will pay a bonus based on concrete strength and air and do a percent within limits analysis of those test results, strength and air. For local agencies, no need to worry about have to pay a bonus on any concrete paving. That is only for MDOT trunk line type projects. But again, it's all the information is more in the special provision as it is currently. Again, just real quick background on the current requirements in 2012 for ASR testing for your sands. 3 options essentially for that. You test the sand for 1260, a short test. It was taken out for a very short time and then put back in as at the request of industry because there are some sand sources that do utilize that test result to have passing results. The other option is the 1293. That's a year-long test. If your sand fails either of those, if you do not have passing test results, you need to use the actual mix design of the mix you're proposing and check the mix with a similar type of test to 1260 and check for that expansion using whatever mitigation to prevent that ASR that you are then required to use on the project. So that's a really quick background on 2012 specs just to get everybody up to speed. So now we can dive into the 2020 draft spec book. It is available on MDOT's website. If you go to publications on their main michigan.gov/MDOT, and you go to publications and then click on standard specifications for construction, it is linked to that main standard specs page way at the bottom. It says draft 2020 specs. You download the massive PDF file for review. Again, this is a draft as of July. Late July is when I last downloaded it, the latest version, and it is not finalized yet. So it will be finalized, as I've been told, fall of 2020. We are now a few days into the actual fall season based on the calendar. Leaves are starting to change, so that hopefully will be finalized in the next month or two. And I've been told Again, I don't work for MDOT, I work for MCA. So I've been told that printed copies and the final PDF version will be posted early 2021. That is the timeline. This was all going to be done this year, actually in time for the October letting this later this week. But COVID really threw a wrench into all of that and pushed everything back. So we are looking at early 2021 for the availability of the final version of it. Nothing is set in stone yet. And then it will be in full effect for the August 2021 letting. That is the plan. That may get shifted around a little bit, but definitely all fiscal 2022 projects, which starts October of 2021, will be using it, and actually some that are going to be done in a couple of months leading up to that. So that's what we've been told is the timeline for it, August 2021 letting. There is discussion on if you do have a project that is let before that, and a contractor or supplier, or through the prime contractor requests a change, and it is something that is coming up in the new spec book, particularly on MDOT projects, local agency would obviously be up to the local engineer, but they would consider any change to update to the newest version of the spec. Again, concrete related changes we're covering today. So let's get into those overall changes to the 2020 spec book as it relates to concrete specific things. These are general, overarching, concrete specific changes. And we'll get into the nitty gritty details of each of them later. First off, those tables I showed you from 601 and 701, those are pulled out of their each individual chapter on pavements or structures. And we're now going to combine all those, since there's so much duplication between P1 and S2. It's pretty much the same mix. Between P2 and S3, same type of thing. There's so much duplication, so that those are now taken out, combined again, and moved to a new division, Division 10, called Portland Cement Concrete Mixtures. So this is, I'm not sure how they're going to handle that with bid items, because we only have 7-digit bid item numbers. So any concrete paving item typically starts with 602. Concrete bridge items typically, 703, I believe, 702, 701, things like that. So these, I'm not sure how they're going to handle that. If they're not going to have pay item code numbers, we're waiting to see on how that all gets implemented. So I don't have an update on bid item numbers for that Division 10 yet. Most of those are included in other items, so I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I don't think they're going to have any bid item code names, code item numbers for Division 10, but because that usually all gets incorporated in other items. So a lot of 601 and 701 are gone and moved to Division 10. Sections 702 and 703, mortar and grout and patching, repair, and overlay mixes, are also, because those are about the concrete mixes used. That's for structural bridges, Division 7 type items, are also moved into Division 10. Sections 604, which was contractor quality control, and 605, which was quality assurance or acceptance, are pretty much now gone. The information from those is in the standard spec, 1002 and 1003, or some of that item may have, some of the information in those items may be retained in a special provision. We are, for the last 8 years, we've always, when we had any concrete in a project, had to include the 604A or 604B concrete special provision. We will see if that is going to be the case. No word on whether everything from that special provision is taken out. I suspect you will still have to include, with any concrete, have to include a 604A or 604B type of special provision. It'll be much smaller. It won't be the 20 some odd, 30 some odd pages that you've seen, because most of that info should be in the standard spec now. Some more overall changes before we get into specifics. Since all the concrete mixture information is taken out of Divisions 6 and 7, they mostly now just contain construction related information. How you're building that item, paving, concrete bridge, whatever, with the concrete material specifications. Speaking of which, Division 9 is materials in general. And so though that is still going to stay the same as it is, with cementitious materials, admixtures, aggregates, etc. That's all still in 9. But if you're combining those materials together to make concrete, that's also now covered in Division 10. So as concrete producers, whether it's a contractor or a ready mix plant, precast, most of your information that you need to reference is going to be hopefully in Divisions 9 and 10 only. If there is a concrete special provision that's still in place, there may be some information in that special provision, which I'm assuming would have a 604A or 604B code, but we'll wait and see till all those come out when the lettings start getting posted. For that August 2021 letting, we'll probably see projects start posting in June of 2021. So we're still a few months out. Some of this information may change before then, but that's overall what we're looking at. So diving specifically into concrete pavements, we'll look at that here. Division 6, there's a nice shot from the 196 Hudsonville project from earlier this summer at the M6 interchange. So section 601 is now blank, reserved. That used to be Portland cement concrete mixtures. It's all in Division 10, whether been split up and some moved to 1001 and 1004. Section 602, concrete pavement construction. You see a shot here of lane ties doing the destructive testing, lane tie pullout resistance, where they jack to see the pullout resistance of that lane tie in the concrete slab. That exact one that you see, I'm not sure if those were implanted or are epoxy coated. It's hard to tell from the photo. But if those were implanted in the fresh concrete, whether slip form or fixed form through the forms, that would not be required now for the future. Pull-out testing is only required for lane ties that are going to be adhesive anchored into the hardened concrete. So they drill the holes, blow out the dust, take a wire brush, clean out the hole, blow it again, insert epoxy into the hole, and then stick the bar in, and the epoxy flows out. You can use a cementitious grout as well. Most contractors choose the epoxy, but and then allow the epoxy to set. And MDOT does require verification testing to make sure you do have proper pull-out resistance. So this test you'll see less of for those bars, and none where those bars are implanted into fresh concrete, only adhesive anchored. So that is a change from the current 2012 spec. Another change that we're going to see is the dowel alignment for the entire length of the bar, which is an 18-inch long bar that you see in the basket there. Dowel alignment now is going to be required to be a 1/2 inch over that 18 inches as opposed to a 1/4 inch. That is more in alignment with what other states around us are doing. This is most likely a result of MDOT's participation in the National Concrete Consortium, where a number of states get together, state DOTs, along with industry, and talk about best practices and the latest and greatest. And MDOT has realized that other states have been using this a 1/2 inch alignment over the 18-inch bar for a very long time, and with very little problem as a result of that. So the guy standing there with his back to us is the technician with the level, adjustable level in his hand based on the grade of the roadway, to verify that alignment has cups on each end of that level that he sets on those bars once they are in position and staked and pinned down into the grade below. Second thing, the test joint. So this is for slip form paving jobs where they utilize a dowel bar inserter, which is this project you see is not utilizing. They're using dowel baskets on this project pictured. But if the contractor elects to use a dowel bar inserter with loose dowels and has this piece of equipment incorporated into the paving train, the MDOT requires them to do a test joint periodically on each bound, a certain number of times, depending on the size of the job, where they actually pave out beyond where they're going to saw back and create their header for the next pour. And they implant dowels instead of the plastic tubes or sleeves in that test joint. And it's a destructive test because they have to then expose the dowels to verify the alignment of the dowel bar inserter. And so that language in the spec is simply clarified and simplified because that was getting interpreted differently. And so they wanted some more direction to their field staff as far as being a similar process used throughout the state for that verification of the dowel alignment on a dowel bar inserter project. Another very slight change, actually. The texture machine example you see pictured here, texture and cure machine, is instead of it requiring tracks, which you see on this machine here, it just needs to be steering controlled. All of them do have tracks. There are some rubber tired machines available, but they're generally not steering controlled. They're more of a work bridge. So that was just simply clarified that as long as it's steering controlled, they're getting away from a means and methods type of requirement and going to more of a performance base as far as if you can control the steering of the machine so that it provides consistent groove, alignment, depth, etc. It doesn't require steel tracks, or rubber tracks or rubber tires. That just, as long as you can have the proper end result, you're not going to dictate the exact piece of equipment that you need. So that's very slight. As it matters, to the contractors, they're still really the only machine available is the one type of one you see pictured. Still produces the best results. But one that is a little bit new is going to be that no quality control coring is going to be allowed. Only the department or their engineer or firm or representative will be coring the pavement for QA purposes. Some contractors in the past have utilized their own in-house QC coring procedure, program, etc., just to have their own information. But MDOT does not want to make Swiss cheese out of all their brand new concrete pavements. So they are requiring contractors not to do that. It will no longer be allowed. There's still verification cores on the QA side. One of the larger changes is the fixing of spalls in new pavements. They've really simplified this very much. There was about 2.5 pages in the old spec book devoted to spall repairs of new pavements, which if you do it right, you shouldn't have any. So why are we devoting that much time and effort to it? That means we have a problem and fix the cause, not the symptoms of that problem. So they've simplified it and said anything less than 1 inch, just fill with the joint sealant during the joint sealing process. Intermediate spalls, which are then less than 4 inches by 2 feet, saw cut the edges and fill with a certified material from the qualified products list per 914.05. That's that spall repair materials are in Division 9, Section 914. Major spalls, anything greater than an intermediate spall, then you just fix with a standard concrete pavement repair. If it affects more than one slab, or more than, I should say, 2 slabs, you may get into removing full slabs, but at the very least, you're looking at standard plan R44, which is a concrete pavement repair, standard plans, and doing a regular full depth repair to fix that spall at that location. So that's, I feel, a significant improvement, much less invasive to the minor spalls, but then much better fix for those major spalls. Again, we shouldn't have those on new pavements, but sometimes it does happen. Here's another one that is going to be a change because nobody is used to this measurement procedure. We're going to see how things work out with this. Cleaning joints prior to sealing. The vertical faces inside the joint, the sides, need to be roughened to a concrete surface profile chip number 2. If you don't know what that is, you go to the icri.org. You can physically order a set of these chips. I believe they go from 0 to 9 or 1 to 10 or something like that, with 0 or 1 being super smooth and 10 being like a milled surface, a very rough surface. So shot blasting is somewhere in there, sand blasted is somewhere in there, milled, shot blasted, sand blasted, all those different textures are represented on these chips. And so I foresee ICRI getting a huge surge in orders of these rubber chips that come on a ring, large key ring type of thing that folks are going to want in the field to verify if the inside of the joint has the roughened surface to the right level. but that's what that is. So you go to icri.org to find out more about that. What that is taking the place of is specific PSI requirements on the water pressure blasting and or sand blasting and or compressed air to clean. So again, more of a performance specification where instead of, oh, your water is 1200 PSI, you need 1500 PSI. Or, oh, your compressed air is not the right PSI, it's too high or too low. You know, as long as you can get the insides of that joint clean so that that sealant can adhere to the sides of the joint and stay down in the joint, you can use whatever method you need to get it there. So that the inspector actually has to check to make sure that those joints are clean and to the right roughened surface, as opposed to just check marking a PSI value, you know, on some checklist. So it's a little different as far as the inspection in the field there. Another minor change, cold weather limitations. MDOT at first wanted to require blankets in anything under 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the ACI definition of cold weather. So industry said, well, if it's not freezing, there's no reason to really have blankets. We can get by with plastic sheeting just to keep the heat in to get that curing process continuing. And harden up that slab. So plastic sheeting is going to be required in the 33 to 40 degree range, because again, that is cold weather. It's not freezing, but it is cold weather. And anything under 32 would require insulation blankets with at least an R value of 7. So we felt reasonable. If you do have freezing temperatures, you're going to want to insulate that slab. And if you do have cold temperatures under 40, you're going to want to at least protect it with plastic. So that is a little different. That has been added to the spec based on some recent experience in the last couple of fall seasons where we've had concrete paving going late into the fall and early into the winter on some jobs in the last few years. So that's it for concrete paving. I know there's some agencies on the call that probably don't do a lot of concrete paving, and you're more interested in the other uses of concrete, which is obviously why we want to cover that as well. Here in Division 8, incidental construction. Here you can see I'll call it an ADA ramp being constructed. The terminology is all changed. So we'll get into that and why they're calling that, and some differences and changes you're going to see on all your jobs, regardless of the pavement type, where you do have these incidental items: curb and gutter, sidewalks, driveways, etc. First off, Section 803 in Division 8 is for concrete sidewalk, curb ramps, and steps. The old spec, current 2012 spec, is they call them sidewalk ramps versus sidewalk, because you pay for this ramp area. If you can see my mouse on the screen, you pay for the ramp area separately than the main part of the sidewalk, so that because a lot of agencies require thickening of this, there's more attention paid to the stakes and the grades and string lines and forms and things, and this is always been a separate pay item for sidewalk ramp, but now they're changing it terminology to curb ramp, because a lot of sidewalks also have ramped areas with running slopes, you know, that match the road grade or the subgrade grade of surrounding ground. So they wanted to make sure it's when you approach an intersection or a curb or the edge of the roadway, they're calling it instead a curb ramp. The landings are now included. So this landing area here, or turning space, depending on who you talk to as far as terminology, you got your regular sidewalk going back in both directions, but where they meet is what's often referred to as a landing or turning space. That used to be included in the sidewalk item, but we've had landing issues because it is a turning space and has tighter tolerances and requirements on cross slopes than the regular running sidewalk in either direction. They want to include it in the curb ramp pay item. So curb ramps used to just include the actual ramp, but now includes the landing. So that is a change for those of you local agencies when you're doing your intersection projects and in redoing your sidewalks at those locations. So that is one change. Landings are included with sidewalks. The other change is the pay item. It used to be for curb and gutter, you would just pay for the lineal foot, whether it had the gutter profile, transition, or was the knockdown area for the opening. All the way through, you would just pay the lineal foot price for that curb and gutter section. When in reality, there's slightly less concrete, but way more labor required in order to make sure this is right. And this curb and gutter opening that they're paying for separately now, which is called curb ramp opening concrete, paid by the lineal foot, this way, it has to meet ADA requirements. The slopes, the difference in slopes coming down versus going back up are entirely different than the slopes and requirements for the curb and gutter away from the opening. This is part of the traveled sidewalk and needs to meet ADA requirements. So they're going to pay for this area separately, requires a lot more attention to detail here than the standard curb and gutter profile. So that is a brand new pay item. Be aware of that. That's going to be coming up. Curb ramp opening, paid for by the foot, separate from the curb and gutter, paid for by the lineal foot, and then curb ramp and landing all here paid for as curb ramp by the square foot, and then sidewalk paid as usual by the square foot. So that is a fairly big change for pretty much every local agency, regardless of what you do as far as pavement types on your roadway network. So that's the big one in Division 8. And then the big one overall is that we have a brand new Division 10 Portland cement concrete mixtures. So this is now where you're going to go for all your concrete material related questions. So we have 6 sections in this division. Concrete production equipment and facilities used to be in 601. Contractor quality control was typically 604. Quality assurance was 605. Portland cement concrete mixtures, a lot of that was in 601, and a lot of it was in the special provision as well that you've been seeing for the last 8 years or so, various versions of. And then some of your structural and miscellaneous cementitious type mixes are in 1005 and 1006. Those are the ones from the Division 7 structural concrete or bridge division in the spec book. Since they are cementitious, a lot of our ready-mix suppliers do supply those via ready-mix, but can also be mixed on site depending on quantities, etc. But those are in 1005 and 1006. So Division 10, everything related to concrete. What is the big change? Well, this is going to be the big one for everyone. All that nomenclature that I talked about before, P1, P2, S2, D, DM, P1M, all of that is changing to a PSI or strength classification. Again, this is what the industry has gone to. This is what, in general, our ready-mix producers and concrete producers like to go with, which is you tell me how strong it needs to be. I will use certified, qualified, tested materials in that mix, and we'll classify everything by strength. Yes, we'll, for exterior concrete, which is all MDOT concrete, requires freeze thaw resistance and air entrainment, except for things far below the frost line. But most of it does. We will obviously have air entrainment for all that, but the main thing is we're going to classify everything by strength. So if some of you may remember, we kind of were that way in the years past. I think D45 or 45D was the bridge deck classification in the past. I believe maybe some county agencies still relied on a similar type of nomenclature for their mixes, but that was what MDOT is going to. So P1 and P1M both are 3,500. However, P1M being the high performance, a little difference in the optimized aggregates and things there requires that HP classification as well. If you just spec 3,500 for your pavement or your curb and gutter or whatever it is, you're just going to get the standard mix. If you specify an HP, then you'll get the optimized gradation and typically a special provision included in the proposal to specify the requirements of that high performance mix. So just note that strength plus optimized ag gradation for high performance. That's what the HP stands for, high performance. One thing that is staying the same is your patching mixes. So for those road agencies that have concrete pavements that they're fixing with full depth repairs, P-NC is staying the same. The patching mix with non-chloride accelerator stays as that same code, minimum 7 sac with a maximum 8 sac only when you have air temperatures less than 50. Your non-chloride accelerator is still optional if needed to get the required strength. And that required strength stays the same, which is a 300 PSI flexural. That's where you're breaking a beam versus a cylinder like we see pictured here. You are not doing cylinders for pavement repair projects. With that PNC mix, you never cast cylinders or break cylinders like you see here in the lab at 28 days. Once the beams have achieved opening strength, then the patch is paid for, and there's no reason to wait more days in order to get a strength number. We're relying entirely on flexural strength for concrete pavement repairs and full depth patches. That for P-NC is a 300 PSI. If you choose to use a P1 or P1M for your pavement repair project, you still go with that 550 PSI opening strength like you do on a new pavement. But if you want the higherly repairs with P-NC, then it's a 300 PSI flex. Your Tremie mixes are now essentially the same as your S2 and P1 because they're just based solely on strength. If there are any other different requirements for a Tremie mix, as far as aggregates, admixtures, water content, etc., then the concrete producer would have to obviously note that with their mix design submittals, which is something we'll talk about on Thursday morning when you tune in at 10 a.m. We'll talk about JMF submittals and mix designs. But S1 is a 4,000 mix now. S2M for those that do a high performance bridge. Structural sidewalks is a 3,000, just like P2 for shoulders. S3. So just remember it's a PSI requirement from here on out. And what do we need? 3,000, 3,500, 4,000, 4,500, and is it an HP high performance type of mix? So let's look at a chart that has the summary of all these. We've got the new code name along the top, the old code name that we have been used to for a number of years and decades actually, and then what those items are typically used for. I'm sure I'm leaving some things out as far as what each of these mixes can be used for. And many times you can often use a higher grade of mix for a lower grade item. You can use, as long as the other requirements specific to that item are met, if there's certain aggregate requirements and minimum cementitious or minimum supplementary cementitious materials, water cement ratios, things like that. But you typically can use a higher grade for a lower item on your project to group things together for lot sizes or ease of construction and things like that. But that's your summary chart of what you're going to be using from here on out. Another change, which we petitioned for and MDOT agreed to, is that this is the old table 601-1, which is our haul time table, which are concrete pavers with their portable plants and our ready mix producers always look at as far as what they're allowed for haul times from their plants. MDOT did not want to change the times. We just wanted to have a little more flexibility with some of that. Our rationale for this change, we suggested this as an industry and MDOT agreed, is that most mixes nowadays have a minimum supplementary cementitious content, fly ash or slag cement. Fly ash and slag cement make better concrete, performing concrete overall long-term especially. We said that because of this, that has a retarding effect in most cases, particularly in the normal to cooler temperature ranges. So we said, what if we bump that lower temperature limit from 60 to 65? Therefore, in those still fairly cool but slightly warmer temperatures, we still get that longer haul time on our concrete. So it might seem like a very minor change, and it probably is, but it does give our ready-mix producers a little more flexibility in that cooler weather, because most of their mixes are having that cooling effect and that the slowing down of the set with the higher amounts of supplementary materials. So MDOT is agreeing to that change that will come into effect in the 2020 book, this 60 to 65 temperature change. Another, again, slight change, but may help with some confusion and discussion and disagreement on projects in the field, is that they've clarified and added some more language that adding water to a mixer on site, which you can adjust a mixer on site when it pulls up and it's low on slump or has low water cement ratio and you're not bumping up against your maximum water cement ratio yet. You can do that as long as you can do that in multiple increments, as long as they're added within 15 minutes of each other and mixed in. This is similar to what is already in ASTM C94, very similar. I think it's almost the same language. And all those water additions do have to occur prior to the start of discharge into the forms. You can't, as it's always been, you can't pull up on site, add water to the mixer, mix it to your 30 revolutions to mix that water in, start your discharge, and get 2 yards in and realize, hey, we want to add more water. I know it's done a lot of times on commercial and residential jobs and things like that, but on MDOT jobs, they allow one addition of water at the beginning and mix that water in, and if you start discharge into the forms, you're not allowed to add water after that. However, if you haven't started discharge, you've added a little bit of water, mixed it in, and do a quick check test just to check your slump, and you're still too low, still too stiff, not enough workability desired for the contractor, and you're not up against your maximum slump or your maximum water cement ratio, you can add water again as long as you have not gotten to within that 15 minutes from the first addition of water. So you're not allowed to start discharge into the forms. You can discharge to do a check test to verify that and add water again. So that aligns with ASTM C94, which is the industry specification. So hopefully there's no confusion about that. We've not changed and allowed adding of water during placement of the concrete in the forms. That is still always the same that we've seen. All right. Contractor quality control. This used to be in section 604 and in the 604 special provision, 604A or B. This was in the special provision where they required side-by-side correlation to air meters, QC tester and QA tester. It now clarifies that slightly and says we need to have the exact same sample being used side-by-side. That is a true side-by-side correlation test. 2 air meters, 1 wheelbarrow. All right, question that just popped up. What if there is no trim water to be added? Let me back up the slide here. If you do not need to adjust this truck when it arrives on site, you do a check test if necessary off the initial part of the discharge after a 1/4 of a cubic yard. You haven't discharged into the forms necessarily. You do your check test and you're good to go, then you just go ahead and pour. So hopefully, Eduardo, that answers your question. If you do not need to add any adjustment water on site, then just go ahead and pour. There's no need to even do any of this, worry about any of this language. You're ready to go right from the start. So all the water was added at the plant, and you've done your slump and or air checks, and you're ready to pour. Back to this slide, same sample, side-by-side correlation. That side-by-side correlation has been required for the last 8 years for your QC and QA testers. And it's also, they clarified that language and said, anytime you have new equipment or new personnel or change out your personnel or change out your equipment, you have to do that correlation again. So chances are, in some cases, you may have to do it every day. And that is from the same wheelbarrow. You do not get two separate samples and two separate wheelbarrows for two separate testers doing side-by-side testing. It's the same sample. Also, it's required that you do that verification test or correlation test again between the 2 meters whenever there's a significant difference, is what they call it. I don't know what that is. It's up to the testers and or engineers or field reps to determine. Personally, when I see the air meters read greater than that 0.8%, that's obviously right there. But if you're trending together, usually within 0.2, 0.3, I usually like to see that. But if that difference starts growing, if somebody gets a 6.0 and the other person gets a 6.7, that to me is a red flag that, hey, what's going on here? Why are the 2 meters reading significantly different? But over time, most experienced testers and inspectors and QC/QA personnel will realize what they're typically running as far as the differences between those meters. So yeah, they didn't define a significant difference, just that you need to when that occurs. One thing that we advocated for is that it's always been that QC test results have to be submitted to the engineer, the QA personnel within, I believe, 24 hours. Well, we wanted that information flow to occur the other direction as well. So we have advocated that the QA results, as soon as they have them, also be submitted within 24 hours. And so then they made that contingent on when they receive the QC results, they have to submit the QA test results back within 24 hours. So if they have fresh concrete results, that the concrete producer or prime contractor or concrete sub is not waiting more than 48 hours to get relatively real-time results from the other side of the testing, so that they can compare QC and QA results prior to identifying a problem at 28 days. And again, the break results, like you see an example of here at 28 days, those need to be submitted within 24 hours of when they are generated. So not just the fresh concrete, but also the hardened concrete results. So that is new for those of you on the QA agency, consulting for agencies side. That is an information. You may have already been doing that, which is good practice. And it depends on where you go, whether that there are folks that choose to do that. But now is required within 24 hours. Again, the big change, they're listed in section 1004, is the nomenclature of all the mixes. You're not going to be seeing the P1s and P2s and S1s and S2s and Ds like you did in the past. It's going to be all by concrete strength classification, PSI. As far as patching, repair, and overlay mixes, I didn't delve as much into the mortars and grouts and structural repair ones because I'm not as well versed in those. But if you do have any questions on them, I will find someone who is an expert, probably one of our ready-mix producers. But the one I have been in touch with is P-NC. Your patching mixes, like you see being done in these photos, does not require any compressive strength cylinders. So if you are doing one of these repair jobs of a concrete pavement using a P-NC mix, you should not see any compressive cylinders out on the job, whether they're 6x12s or 4x8s. You should only see what we have pictured in the bottom right there, which are the beams. And for P-NC, you only need 300 PSI, again, done in the field with a similar curing condition as to the patches themselves. If they're covered with blankets, cover the beams with blankets. If they're just sprayed with curing compound, spray the curing compound on the beams. But as soon as you get 300 PSI, the repairs are open to traffic, and full payment for that item is payable to the contractor. No 28-day cylinders. Okay, quick reminder of what has not changed in the spec book as we're pushing up against our 1 hour time frame here. Again, division, we have a new division, division 10, concrete materials, but everything that goes into that concrete, sand, stone, cementitious, supplementary cementitious, water, etc., it's all still in division 9. So all of that is still in division 9. But if you happen to make concrete with those division 9 materials, then that's in division 10. The ASR testing, like I said, still is being required. It is still valid for 2 years. There was some discussion, again, about pulling out the 1260 results. That's still in there for now. There also was some discussion about requiring it every year. So you always have a test going, because what we've seen with some of the aggregate producers, sand producers, is they'll run a test, a year-long test, and then they get their passing result and they say, all right, I got 2 years, not knowing that 1 year from that test having started, or a test result, I should say, they need to start another one because it takes a year to run it. So then during that 2 year period, the second of those 2 years, they need to be running their next test so that they have a test result that hopefully passes when the 2 year period is up. So we have run into that with some of the sand producers in the state. So then they scramble and try to get a year-long test done in less than a year, which doesn't work. As it stands now, any pumped concrete is still requiring optimization of aggregates. That's another huge discussion point. I don't see that changing yet. We are still working on that. So that is still being interpreted differently throughout the state. We're trying to make that uniform as far as what needs to be done, as far as the aggregates, the testing of the aggregates, what's required as far as any changes in cementitious or not, and the answer is no on that. But at any rate, that is still being required. I don't see that changing yet, but we are working on it. Your materials cert requirements are still all that they've been, as far as if you're a pre-qualified aggregate supplier, and the reduced testing then from that versus, what's 1 per 10,000 tons, except on optimized jobs, which is 1 per 5,000 tons. If you're not a pre-qualified ag supplier, you got to do a test every 1,000 tons, et cetera, et cetera. So that's still the same. Your JMF submittals, Form 1976, that is still the same. The review required of that, et cetera. That we'll be discussing on Thursday morning at this time, 2 days from now. So tune in for that. It's the same link, by the way, all 3 days here. So you'll log back in tomorrow, 10 a.m. with the same link. Testing personnel certification requirements. Because of COVID, those ACI certified, or MCA, MDOT field certified for testing did get extended. The MDOT portion did, MCA portion did, because ACI was already good for those that expired this year. In the state, they were pushed back to December. So but those, you're still going to require that. It was only pushed back about 8 months so that they could still test this summer. But if they are expired as of April 2020, they are going to need to come through this next testing certification season, and the off season for those of you on the call, but our busy season here at the association. QC plans, those requirements are still in place. The JMF submittal, Form 1976, and all the backup documentation that we'll talk about, those are off in those QC plans. We're not going to talk about QC plans specifically, but the JMF stuff is going to be talked about on Thursday, and those QC plan requirements have not changed. There's still 26 items needed in that QC plan that are required from the contractor, prime contractor, concrete sub, QC testing consultant, ag supplier, concrete supplier, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that is still all the same. And the joint seal recess requirements. We've seen this. This has changed. I went as far back as 2006. So for the last 14 years, since I've been in Michigan, this has been the detail of your joint sealing. The sealant is required to be flush or up to 1/8 of an inch recess. This is different than the past or other states or what you see around the country where they talk about 1/8 to 1/4 inch recess. MDOT has had this for a while, and we're now seeing that there's a little more attention being paid to this, where they want flush to 1/8 of an inch. We don't want overbanding. Those of you familiar with the black snakes on the road, we do not want that for concrete. That's fine for asphalt. We do not want that for concrete. So it does need to be flush, not overbanded, or up to 1/8 of an inch lower than the surrounding. So a recess of 0 to 8 inches, 0 to 1/8 of an inch. That's what we would like to see. But it's been this way for 14 years. So those of you that are recessing your joints more than 1/8 of an inch have technically been out of compliance with the standard plan. So I'm pushing on 1 hour here. I know we allotted an hour and a half, just so everybody, we had enough time for the presentation and any questions. But to summarize what we're seeing with the new 2020 book, big change is the new Division 10, concrete materials. All the other divisions, 6, 7, 8, have information being pulled out and put into Division 10. So you'll see some blank spots, some reserved sections, some smaller divisions there now. And with that, the nomenclature being changed, the grades of concrete. We don't have P1M anymore. That's going to be 3,500 HP. We don't have D anymore. We have 4,500. It's all based on compressive strength. Another one for concrete pavements, lane tie, pull out testing only on adhesive anchored bars, not on the implanted bars into the fresh concrete. We have a new pay item for curb ramp opening, where your curb and gutter profile dives down and has to meet ADA requirements in that area, because that is a traversed area by pedestrians, and that's being paid for by the lineal foot. I have not seen the details yet as far as where they're measuring that to, if it's just in between the transitions, or is it at the back of the transition where the curb and gutter profile goes back to normal, or how far, or is it the first joint beyond? I'm not sure. On that, just be aware of that is going to be changing in the future, and we'll check into that and hopefully have updated information once we get closer to August 2021. And then minor tweaks, as we said, to the haul time, the temperatures there. The spall repairs, simplified that, which is good. The joint cleaning, those of you on concrete pavements having to inspect the joint faces prior to installation of backer rod and joint sealant. And then cold weather requirements on concrete paving for anything less than 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So that pretty much does it for what we see as the main changes to the 2020 spec book. There's other minor ones that I probably have not covered, but I believe for Division 6, 8, and 10, I've covered the majority of them. I'm not the concrete bridge construction engineer. That's not my wheelhouse. So there are, I'm sure, some changes in that MITA has worked out with the Bureau of Bridges there at MDOT that have covered that Division 7 section. But again, that's the link for finding the PDF of this webinar slide handout, as well as others for your reference if you're interested in them that we did in the spring. My email is there. I'm happy to answer any questions anytime via email or by phone. Again, that is our job at MCA, is to help those of you designing and building with concrete to answer your questions and make sure that you're confident in those items that you're going to be using concrete to build. So specification, design, joint layout help, materials questions like these, any spec review, technical issues, testing issues, anything you have regards to concrete. That's our job, is to help those of you be confident with those concrete items. So if anybody has any more questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A window. I'll keep it open for a bit. If you have any questions you want to email me, I'd be happy to do that as well. Give me a phone call if you do have anything specific. And if there's any webinars you'd like to have us do, we are going to sit down in the next couple of weeks and plan out a more regular webinar schedule other than just these specific fall local ones. There are some issues we've seen crop up in the industry, which may or may not apply to the road building side, which most of you here are more on the call for, but other concrete related topics, we're going to be rolling those out in the future. So make sure you bookmark that virtual learning page, or just check out our website, our homepage once in a while, because we'll feature whenever we do make some updates and have some of these planned in the future. But we do plan to continue the webinar type of format for a bit this fall, for those of you looking to get some more technical info. Let me make sure that virtual learning page is working. I'm going to drag it back over here. Make sure you type in info.myconcrete.org/virtual learning. Let me refresh. There we go. Let's see if the PDF is going to download. Yep. So make sure you type info.myconcrete.org that you see here /virtual-learning. I don't know if the S is required or not. Probably a good idea to do that. And then click on MDOT Spec Book Update. I was able to upload or to get it to pull up here the PDF of the handouts today. If you can't type in this link here, info.myconcrete.org-virtual-learning/virtual-learning, it is available if you click on resources for professionals and click on free virtual learning webinars. That is how you can get there from our homepage, which is just myconcrete.org. And then click on the MDOT 2020 Spec Book Update for my summary slides in PDF format. Any other questions or concerns? Okay, here's the link again, my phone number and email. All right, Chris has a question. Is it correct to exclude landings from sidewalk ramps when they are poured to different thicknesses? The answer is yes. Right now, the current practice has been to include landings with the sidewalk ramp. So again, to answer your question, in the future, yes, because it's going to be called curb ramp, not sidewalk ramp. That's the first thing. And second thing is, yes, curb ramps are going to include landings. So you do not want, so to answer your question is yes, exclude it right now, because right now the sidewalk ramp is probably a different thickness than the sidewalk. And the landings historically now are poured at the same thickness as the sidewalk and are measured and included with that sidewalk pay item. However, it sounds like the future, MDOT is going to call that a curb ramp, and you're going to include the landing with the curb ramp. So to answer your question, Chris, right now, yes, and probably also next summer, yes, landings are going to be included with the sidewalk, and the sidewalk ramps paid for separately, only the ramp itself. But starting in August 2021, it's going to be called a curb ramp, and the landing will be included with that curb ramp, even if it's a separate thickness that matches the sidewalk itself. They are going to include it, so they'll get paid at that higher price. It depends on their job, obviously, whether the contractor bids it at a higher price. So hopefully that answers your question, Chris. Any other questions while we got on the line? Okay, tune in tomorrow, 10 a.m. We've got understanding the proper use of supplementary cementitious materials and in how they can enhance your concrete's performance. We're talking about slag, cement, and fly ash being used in our mixes, how they make the concrete better, and how we can properly use them to achieve that higher performance. So that's tomorrow, same time, 10 a.m. And on day 3, Thursday, same time, 10 a.m., understanding concrete mix design and the JMF approval process. So those are our next two topics, tomorrow and Thursday. Again, this whole webinar series is going to be repeated later in October. The exact same information. You don't need to re-register if you're on this week, but we know there's a lot of people coming in from the field in the next few weeks as projects start to slow down and wind up, and they're going to have some office time, and they may want to sit in on some of these. So please feel free to tell your coworkers and those at your agencies that we're doing these webinars again later in October 20 through 22. And that go to the LTAP, or Center for Transportation Technology and Training at Michigan Tech, to register for these webinars. Okay, that's all we've got today. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll talk to you all tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. Have a great rest of your day.